This is Bruno Biava. And it's coming up on 04:45 a.m. Central Daylight Time on Sunday, July 27th of 2025. That means it's about 09:45 Universal Time Coordinating. And hopefully we're all adults in the room. And if we're not, well, you're going to possibly hear a story about something that maybe your mom and dad would probably be more qualified to explain or to listen to first before they explain it to you. There's probably going to be a lot of stops and starts in this thing. As some of you know, I'm 63 years old. I'm single. I've never been married. But once upon a time, just like everybody else, I was very young. And I was full of hopes and dreams. And I had a mommy and a daddy. And I had two very, very beautiful and loving sisters. And it seemed like love was everywhere. Well, eventually, mom and dad didn't get along so well. And there was a divorce. And divorce wreaks havoc on children. And moms do the best they can for their kids. I'd like to think my dad did too. Before long, I heard conversations about how my father wasn't. Now you've got to remember, I'm my father's only son. Well, eventually, I'm in the custody of my mother. I've been bounced back and forth a few times. At one point, I was actually placed in what essentially is an orphanage, partially as a punishment. I saw a lot of things in there when I was a kid. When I was young. Too young. It was about the same time that I was starting to notice girls. And I wanted to find a girl. I mean, you really don't think about women at that age. But I really wanted to find a girl. And then we would fall in love. And then we would make our love a gift to God for and in thanksgiving for having brought us together. I really didn't know if I wanted children or not. Excuse me a second. Well, I had known a few girls, but I was too shy and too young to know what a date was. And eventually, along at about the time I was 15, I met somebody who'd become my first girlfriend. Now, I had had a couple of pen pals, but this girl, or young woman, because we were both adolescents, would become my first girlfriend. And for about 2.5 years, we saw each other most every other day. And I wanted to marry her. And I wanted it to be forever. And I thought that I'd just be like a normal guy. We'd get married. I'd find a good, steady job. And we'd be happy together. But we were far too young. And I was too innocent. And it wasn't meant to be. I was also damaged because of my parents' divorce. I had no brothers. I did have one uncle who took a great interest in me. Actually, I had several of my extended family that took a great interest in me and prayed for me. But I was already damaged. And even before I was damaged emotionally, I was damaged physically. I had been in an accident, and as a result of the injuries sustained in the accident, my parents had been told that there was some loss of my capacity to think. By the time I was 10 years old, I had already seen psychiatrists. At 10. So now I'm 16. Had had my first girlfriend. Had loved her deeply. And she had moved on. Now, there's something I got to make perfectly clear here. All right. These women who moved on, they had every right in the world to do so. Because women deserve a husband who's fully capable. They deserve and want a husband, and for their husband's family to get along. Because the world isn't getting any easier for anyone. It wasn't then. It definitely isn't now. And men, well, we're looking for comfort and peace too. We're looking for a woman who's stable. We're looking for pretty much the same kind of love she's looking for. Well, like I said, by the time I was 16, I had already known a lot of heartache. And I couldn't quite understand why. Eventually, I'd try again. And I tried again. And I tried again. And again. And again. By the time I was in my early 20s, I had had 5 or 6 girlfriends, some more serious than others. And a woman and I came together. And We moved in together for a while. Her mom and dad were still together. Mine were not. But we still decided to get married. When we announced our engagement to my family, there was division. Although I still wanted my father to be there. And his second wife. My sisters and my mother put their foot down and said that if I invited my father, that they would not come to the wedding. For a while, that woman that I was living with, or who was living with me, would continue the relationship. But it was already falling apart. And with good reason. She knew that if my family was that unstable, that emotionally there would be stresses within our relationship and drama that would weaken it. And then she left. A few more years would go by. I was in my mid-20s, and on towards my late 20s, I knew a woman that I thought was it, and she was the love of my life. She tried very, very, very hard. She tried harder than any woman I knew. And I tried harder for her than I had for any woman in my life. She was the one who went off in the storm. And because of the emotional damage that I had endured, not at her hand, but because of what had happened in my own family, I came apart. And she went on. I had an emotional breakdown, a mental breakdown. After that, I met another woman, about 3 or 4 years after we broke up. She was blind and had 5 children. She had been divorced herself. And just like before, I was found not to be stable enough. And she met another man, and wisely went her own way. I was in my early 30s by this point. I had reached a point where I was incredibly depressed. I was under a lot of stress at work and was actually placed on a leave of absence. I was alone. Things didn't look real good. A woman comes along and decides to date me. Doesn't last very long, just a few weeks. Then I reach out to the sister of my first real girlfriend, just to find out how she's getting along. And I come to find out that she had divorced, that she had 3 children. And I asked her sister if I could call her. And of course she said yes. And so I did. And not long after that, I received a telephone call informing me that the girl, or the woman, that I had seen for just a couple of weeks had become pregnant and said that I was the father. Well, I immediately told the woman that I had known so many years ago. 20 years had passed from the time we were kids, but I told her immediately. And I asked her if she would consider marrying me and helping to raise this child. I explained to her the same thing that the adoption agency that had contacted me told me, that this woman had been promiscuous, that there was a strong chance that I wasn't the father. Well, that woman that I knew so many years ago, who herself had 3 children, said no. She still continued to see me, though. And for the next 6 months, I wrestled with myself as to what I was going to do. I knew that if I adopted, or if I kept custody of the children, that my own family dynamic would destroy it. All the drama in my family. Because there'd be fighting over whether I was even capable of raising a child. And I'd be condemned for what I had done in bringing a child into the world by a woman I wasn't married to. I knew that child would need one incredible, strong woman of character. And I prayed for that woman to arrive in my life. I had even told the mother that I'd be willing to marry her. And she said she wanted nothing of the child and she wanted nothing of me. Of course, by this time, I just don't know what to do. I didn't know if I was ever going to get back to work. All I knew is that I wanted that child to have a better chance. So just a few weeks before the due date, I signed the adoption paperwork. And I gave up any rights I had for that child. It was a closed adoption. Because for all the mess that my world had become, I wanted that child not to know of it. And I prayed prayer upon prayer that he would be adopted into a home unlike what I had known, where mom and dad know that once a child is brought into a world between them, that they're to raise that child up, not to glorify themselves, but in thanks to God. Just as they should have been dedicating their own love in thanks to God. For many years, I didn't see anyone after that. I can remember at one point when I worked in the office, hearing my coworkers wonder if I was gay. Finally, about a dozen years ago or so, I thought I'd try one more time. I covered up the fact that I had given up my child for adoption. And I met a woman who herself had 2 children. One was a daughter in her 20s. The other one was a son who was 18. She was a widow. After we got to know each other a little bit, I told her about the situation. We didn't last but a few months. She and her children knew that they needed a man in their life that would pick up after this woman's husband and those children's father had passed. Someone that would help spiritually steer the family. But because I hadn't been so well steered myself, it wasn't meant to be. Now, all during this time, I'd been praying for all the women I knew that they would find the men who would bring stability. I'd like to think that most all of them did. That God did provide for them the men that they needed that could do what I could not. Now I'm 63. I'm looking back at my life. And I've learned a very tragic but important lesson. And this is a lesson that men and women, boys and girls, need to learn. God is real. God is love. When we play each other for one another's affection, we are playing love. We are playing God. And God gets very jealous. If there's one thing God doesn't like, it's men like me. You don't want to be me. And if you're a man, the best way to avoid becoming me is to hold on and wait. If you come from a family where your mom and your dad are still together, wait for the right woman. And women, if you don't want to create somebody like me, then find a man whose mom and dad stayed together. Don't mess around with premarital sex. And even if you can't seem to find each other, devote your life to giving thanks to God for the life you do have, as miserable as it might become. And the reason I'm even bringing this stuff up is not because I'm trying to clear my conscience. It's because not a day goes by that I think about that sin I committed. That one time. That's all it took. And the punishment that I have to endure, that I've rightfully earned. You don't want to be me. So, if you're young, remember to be happy and to serve God in your happiness and your joy and your work. If you're young and you're married, focus on thanksgiving to God every single day for bringing you together, because it's a miracle. If you're married and have children, no matter how boring it gets, for the sake of the children, raise them up, not because they're your own, but because they're a gift from God. Raise them up in thanksgiving. If you're divorced, or a widow or a widower, raise your children up in thanksgiving to God. They have to be first. Raise them up to be more than what you were able to attain themselves. Never lose hope in that. If you're in a situation like I am, whether you be a mother, a birth mother, I should say, or a birth father, don't ever stop praying for that child. Don't ever hide them. Always pray for that child. Always be thankful for the experience, no matter how unbearable it is. know that you fell hard and you fell further away from God when it happened than most humans should be allowed to endure. But know that God loves you too. And that you can't stop loving that child. No matter how much people around you put upon you for doing what you did. If you're a couple without children and you're thinking of adopting, remember that child is a gift from God. And just like all children are, they really don't belong to their parents. They belong to God first. You violate any of these rules, and the sins you commit in this are born not by yourselves, they're born by the child. So think about it. I have. Doesn't make me any saint. I'm far away from it. But boys and girls, I'm telling you this. As an old man. I'm telling you this because I'm praying for that child that I gave up. And all the children in the world that are suffering right now. From neglect, from war, from famine. And I know it's going to take a lot more than just my prayers. To ever make it right. And I hope you pray with me and act. To build a better world, a more peaceful and loving world, a kinder world. So that we can bring ourselves closer to God. Not in glory to ourselves, but in thanksgiving to Him for the life and the love that God has shown us. Amen. Good luck and Godspeed. I hope to see you around town someday.